Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi.
hi.
Yeah,
Hi, everybody. Sorry for the last minute, but we had the speaker dinners right now.
No problem.
problem. Well, we are Thomas and Dominic from NW Professional Traders, and yes, basically we are going to start very soon. But before we start with everything, Tommy is going to clarify that it's basically going to be in English, and yes, because mainly they are from Latin America, but yes, that's going to be all, and then we are going to start, if that's okay with you.
That's okay with me. We have people in Plan B network that can actually help with Spanish lectures very close to mine, but we couldn't organize in such a short notice. But if you need any Spanish lectures to replicate or elaborate on mine, we can provide that.
Okay, great.
I think you have to enable me to share a presentation in Zoom if you can.
Yes, I'm going to make you co-host.
Thank you.
Ahí está. Ahí, Domi, si querés aclararle que cuando quiera arranque a compartir la presentación y antes de que empiece yo acepto a todos y hago la introducción en español y arrancamos.
Okay, dale. Right before, there you go. I was going to tell you that you could already share your screen. Now Tommy is basically going to accept everyone into the meeting, and then he's going to introduce the whole presentation in Spanish, and then when you're ready, you can start.
Thank you.
Ok. Bien. Ok, are you ready?
I am.
Ahí está. Ok. Bien. Bien, ahí ya se están uniendo. Muy buenas a todos, muy buenas tardes. ¿Cómo les va? Vamos a ir haciendo a poquito una introducción en lo que se van conectando el resto de participantes, que son realmente muchos. Quiero aprovechar para comentarles cómo va a ser la dinámica de este seminario que van a estar presenciando el día de hoy. Como se les comentó por el mail y también a quienes sean alumnos nuestros, bueno, como se les comentó por el correspondiente grupo al que forman parte, básicamente esta presentación y este seminario va a ser exhibida principalmente en inglés. De todas maneras, nosotros les compartimos un tutorial que dura 1 minuto y 40 segundos en el que se explica cómo pueden hacer para tener subtítulos en español de esta reunión. Pero así y todo, tampoco se preocupen por si se llegan a perder algún detalle o lo que sea de la explicación. ¿Por qué? Porque para todos los que se queden hasta el final de esta presentación van a recibir, en primer lugar, la certificación, bien, firmada por NW y por Tether, de que formaron parte de este seminario. En segundo lugar, van a recibir la grabación de esta clase, ¿sí? Esta clase está siendo grabada en este momento, y obviamente que va a estar con los respectivos subtítulos en español. Eso lo van a recibir, aclaro, la semana que viene. Estamos a día jueves, lo van a estar recibiendo la semana que viene. Y además, también van a recibir estas presentaciones que estamos compartiendo, obviamente ya editadas en formato español para quienes quieran releerlas, para quien quiera utilizarla para estudiar y demás. Pero todo esto que acabo de comentar lo van a recibir única y exclusivamente si se quedan hasta el final de la reunión. Aquellos que no se queden hasta el final no van a poder disponer de esto. Bien. También si llegan a tener cualquier tipo de duda o consulta, el chat de Zoom está disponible. Nosotros vamos a estar haciéndoles de soporte por el chat por cualquier tipo de duda que puedan tener. Bien. Hecha esta aclaración, no mucho más.
I go?
Yes.
So good evening, everybody. Sorry for the English presentation. My Spanish is a work in progress. I hope it will be enough, good enough to have the entire presentation in Spanish in a few months. But right now, it's better to have it in English. Thank you for being here. So you already have the total syllabus of the course. What we will talk about today is just introduction to Bitcoin and blockchain technology. You may have heard that blockchain technology is the actual real deal and Bitcoin is just an application. That's the typical narrative, especially from 2017, 2019. Actually, our opinion is that starting from Bitcoin is the best way to understand what the blockchain technology is and what the blockchain technology is not. And also to try to have to gather basically more signal to filter out more signal out of the noise, which is a lot, especially because blockchain became kind of a hype during the last years, especially after 2017 and 2018. Many things started to be called blockchain, even without a specific kind of reason. I hope that everybody can see the presentation in the screen. If you confirm, I can start to move the slides. You can see it, right?
Sorry, no, we are not seeing your screen actually.
Okay, let me start again like this. What about now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the lecture will be divided in basically 4 parts. The first one is the heavy one, and then we will do some other smaller part just to be sure of what we are discussing. So the first part will be an explanation of Bitcoin, and this is the most compact possible explanation that we came out with after many years teaching the topic. And we will do Bitcoin essentials in 5 Ws. So the typical English questions: why Bitcoin? And then we will use the question what, who, when, and where to explain the specific components of the overall blockchain technology. And specifically, the blockchain part will just be the 4th question, the answer to the 4th question. So in about 40 minutes, you should have a quite complete understanding of course, very high level. It's impossible in this time to go low level of the way Bitcoin works. In other lectures, like the lecture by Riccardo Mazzutti about private key management, or other kind of lectures in the next days and weeks, you will also have more technical understanding of some specific pieces. But this should be a very good initial overview to understand the general picture. The second point will be to differentiate between Bitcoin and the so-called crypto hype, crypto buzzword. So what is crypto? What is the difference with Bitcoin? What is the amount of signal, the amount of noise that you can filter out from this crypto hype? Same thing we will do with blockchain. And then about blockchain, for the final part of the of the lecture, we will focus a little bit on the idea of business cases. So how to use, what does it mean that your business is using a blockchain? What does it mean to use blockchain in business innovation, financial innovation, industrial innovation, political innovation, or many other cases? So we will focus a little bit on trying to identify the realistic business cases for this kind of technology. So let's start with the first. If it's okay for the organizers, I would actually encourage everybody to interrupt me with questions. Since there is some participation, maybe the best way would be to write in the chat. I will try to keep the chat open here. So so if I see anything, any question that I can easily identify Spanish or in English, I will try to stop and answer every few minutes. So let's start right now with Bitcoin essentials in 5 Ws. So the first question is why. We will spend some minutes not on a technical topic, but on a social, economical, in some ways even cultural topic, to identify what is the reason for the discovery and the creation of Bitcoin. This is important because even if you just want to understand the technology, you have to have at least a very high level understanding of the cultural environment that produced this technology and the objective of the people that worked on this technology, because those objectives went to inform the technological choices a lot. You cannot really understand the choices that have been made in the Bitcoin design if you cannot identify the reasons behind the creation of Bitcoin. So we'll spend some time on that. Even if it's not cryptography, it's not distributed system engineering, is mostly sociology and economics and history of economics, and specifically a specific view of history of economics. Then we will move to understanding what we are moving when we are moving Bitcoin. We will talk about proof of work and Hashcash and SHA-256. We'll make a few examples, but it's pretty simple. You can probably grasp the general concept. Then we will talk about who has a right to move Bitcoin, and we will talk about proof of knowledge or proof of transfer and digital signatures. Then we will talk about when is a Bitcoin transaction final and when are Bitcoin created, and that will introduce the concept of a blockchain. And then for the last question, we will talk about the network topology and specifically the Lightning Network. So where are the Bitcoin locked in order to have fast payments, in order to have fast confirmation or to transact small amounts. So this is the first part of the lecture. Again, feel free to stop me if there is any. Yes, for now I see some comments, but still no specific question. Maybe if you see a question and I'm not noticing, feel free to take the mic and stop me. So let's start with why. The why Bitcoin question, in order to be understood, requires us to go back in time, in some cases back to the 19th century, and some economists like Menger or Ludwig von Mises or Friedrich von Hayek, the so-called Austrian school, the exponents of the Austrian school of economics. It's called Austrian because it was developed initially in Vienna, in Austria, by Austrian people, and then it expanded, especially in the US, with some thinkers like Rothbard and Hoppe and others. Recently, especially in Argentina, there is some kind of revival of this kind of economic thought, and this seems disconnected, but is very, very connected with the initial imprinting of Bitcoin. Let's consider that one of the ancestors of Bitcoin, which Satoshi directly mentioned in order to create Bitcoin, and maybe most probably he also used in order to create Bitcoin, was called e-gold, and was a digital gold certificate, digitally transferable gold certificate that was created by a follower of the Austrian schools of economics, explicitly mentioning this kind of tradition. Satoshi himself, in several post in 2009 mentioned the Mises regression theorem. So this story is important. What is the Austrian School of Economics? This is like a different version of economic thought that was developed especially in opposition with the German School of Economics, that was the mainstream, the classical one, that focus on many things. The most famous things are basically the subjectivity of value, the subjective theory of value, as opposed to the labor theory of value. So the object is valuable not because you work more to do it, but it's valuable because you value it subjectively. They are famous for the marginalist revolution, so the consideration of the component of the marginal utility in order to form prices. They are very famous for the concept of time preference and discount rate. So these are economic concept that you can find here. I'm going to move from the screen just a second because I want to show you. So if you want to understand better this slide, I don't know if you can you can see in the camera, right? Or not?
Yes, we can see you.
So this is a book that I will suggest you to check out. It's written by the journalist Aaron von Wierdum. I will write down everything later, maybe so you can share the name. It's called The Genesis Book, and it's a book about the birth of Bitcoin. And there's an entire chapter, which is, of course, is not a treatise of economics, but it's very good for the purpose of this mention. The part one is especially mentioning spontaneous order, mentioning Hayek and Mises and the Austrian theory of money, and also like the part two will mention Bitgold and other kind of experiments. So the Austrian School of Economics is famous for many things, but more specifically, they focus on some things that have been fundamental for the design of Bitcoin. One is the concept of scarcity. You will see that in Bitcoin, a lot of technological choices has been created in order to focus on the concept of scarcity. How can you recreate the concept of scarcity in the digital world? The digital world is a world where everything is easy to copy because everything is 1 and 0, is binary, and it can be copied exactly without any mistake. There is perfect error correction. So in the digital world, there is nothing scarce. You can have a file, you can copy the file 100 times, 1 million times. So how can you make something digital scarce? Seems impossible, but that's exactly one of the main points of the research about Bitcoin and blockchain. The second point is about management of future uncertainty. So especially the concept of scarcity as a tool to manage future uncertainty of value and utility. And the third very important concept is the concept of inflation. Now you may hear a lot discussing inflation, of course, as a problem with the general increase in price levels. But the concept of inflation within the Austrian schools of economics was not specifically about price increases in general. It was a very specific term identifying the monetary inflation. So the creation of more money by central banks or money producers in general, that will, of course, increase the supply of money with the same demand, thus decreasing the price of money, so the purchasing power of money. So Bitcoin has a lot to do with a school of thinking about inflation, and specifically Bitcoin is a disinflationary currency, and we will discuss what that means a little bit. The second, so you have this kind of cultural framework, which is Austrian economics, and you can read more about that. The internet is full of this. The Mises Institute, Mises.org, is very rich of texts you can read. The second cultural movement is actually called the cypherpunk movement. This is more recent. This is starting from the late 80s and the early 90s. So 1990, 1991, 92, 93. So what does cypherpunk mean? You may know the literary genre of the cyberpunk, like the Neuromancer, Gibson, or science fiction that is this topic in general. So the cyberpunk is from cyber, which means like computer has control. It's a very general science fiction genre in which people are basically oppressed by corporations and governments without privacy, that will use like corporations and governments are using technology to spy on people and to survey people. Cipher instead means a cryptographic code, like a cipher. It's like a code for encryption. And the cypherpunk were a group of scholars, of cryptographers, activists that were basically trying to use the cryptography advancements in order to prevent a cyberpunk future. So cyberpunk, cypherpunk. That's a pun. That's basically a joke to design this movement that was about using cryptography to fight against totalitarian tendencies of technology and anti-privacy. Again, in the book that I was mentioning, the Genesis book, there's also a very good coverage of this. The entire part 2 of the book is called Cypherpunks, and it gives you a very extensive history of this movement. This movement is relevant because even if you don't have Nobel Prizes like from the Austrian School of Economics like Hayek, you still have very famous public figures like the creator of the first browser, Netscape, and recent, the creator of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, that now in jail for revealing war crimes, the creator of Tor, Jake Applebaum, the Onion Network for privacy over the internet, the creator of, for example, BitTorrent, Brian Cohen, the creator of Zcash, the cryptocurrency based on zero knowledge proof, Zuko Wilcox. So many of those people, they were all part of this cryptography mailing list, together with the founders, Tim May and Eric Hughes. So it was a very relevant group of people that is still relevant today. Some of the participants in this group, you will hear them mentioned again in the course of this presentation. Their name are Adam Beck, Dr. Adam Beck, and Dr. Nick Szabo, and Hal Finney, and Wei Dai. We will mention them again because they were directly involved in the creation of Bitcoin, at least in the creation of the pieces that Satoshi Nakamoto connected together in order to create Bitcoin. So instead of focusing on the concept of scarcity, cypherpunks, they are not economists. They are engineers, software engineers, and political activists, and they focus especially in the concept of privacy. Privacy is seen as a tool to reduce force asymmetry. What do I mean? What I mean is that if everybody knows about everybody else's property, so if I know where your property is, how much money you have, and where do you have the money, the main interaction between us may be cooperation in the market, so we just exchange goods and services, or it could be aggression. So I come to you, I have a bigger gun, or I have a bigger, stronger arms, and I take your stuff. So this is a very typical, let's say, aggression interaction between human beings since always. But the point is that if everybody knows everything and everybody else, the stronger can always take the resources from the weaker. While if there is a knowledge asymmetry, is the weaker can hide some information about how much money how much resources he has, or where they are hidden, the strong one cannot take them. Again, just like with the Austrian schools of economics, I want to stress one point. It's not, so now I'm making philosophical points or economical points or social points. It doesn't matter that you agree with this framework. I want to present you this framework because based on this framework, Bitcoin has been designed, and many of the technological choices of Bitcoin, they are derived by this framework, this mental framework. So if you want to understand the technological phenomenon, you have to understand the ideological point of view, even if you disagree, even if you think that, for example, privacy creates more problems than benefits and surveillance has more benefits than problems. You have to understand that the culture generating the Bitcoin innovation is coming from the exactly other way around. Privacy as a goal. Now, why privacy specifically about money? Well, because privacy in communication, with the advent of strong cryptography in the late 80s, was basically achieved. So since the late 80s, experts were able to communicate privately, just like today. We can do it with Signal, or with Elements, or to some degree also WhatsApp, where there is end-to-end encryption, and experts were using that with PGP encryption since the 80s. So sending information in a private way over the internet was a solved problem in the 90s. But sending money, sending value over the internet was not a solved problem. So the cypherpunk started to conceive private cash over the internet. So cash in the sense that I can give it to you and you can give it to me without me knowing anything about you, and without you knowing anything about me, and without a third party knowing everything about us. So it's not like a credit card in which the credit card company will have all my information, and this information can be leaked by the website. So there can be privacy problems when you use credit card. So what these cypherpunks were searching for was a private cash, a bearer instrument, something that I can have in my hand, give it to you without knowing you and without you knowing me, and without a third party in the middle. Of course, these ideas, both ideas, the ideas of the Austrian school and the idea of cypherpunk, to some degree, they failed. Why they failed? The first one, the Austrian School of Economics, failed because the main approach was political. So basically, the idea was to try to convince the government to denationalize the currency. So to convince the central bank to shut down, and the legal tender laws to be abolished, and the money to go back to the market, just like before the creation of the central banks in the beginning of the 20th century. The central banks are relatively recent phenomenon. They started basically right before the First World War. There are some precedents in Scandinavia, but the modern institution of a central bank as a monopolist of money creation is very recent, and it basically dates to the two world wars. So the idea of the Austrians were to go back to denationalization of money. Hayek, the Nobel laureate, he wrote a book called Denationalization of Money. You can read it. But there is an interview you can still find it. If you search for Hayek prediction Bitcoin, you can find this late interview to Hayek, where he was basically saying, you can find it yourself with subtitles and dubbed. And he was basically saying, there is no way we will convince the government to give away the power of money printing. The only way we can do it is to create something that they cannot stop. So it's interesting because in this way, Hayek, from the Austrian perspective, was moving to some kind of cypherpunk perspective, where the idea is that cypherpunk they don't write books, they write code. They create tools in order to make possible to create unstoppable marketplace over the internet. So they want to use privacy to make impossible to stop some exchange of information or value over the internet. So Austrians failed because they were trying to convince the political landscape of denationalizing the money. So now it's funny because what's happening right now in some places, including Argentina, may be a political change in that direction, but usually that was considered unrealistic by Hayek. And at the same time, the cypherpunk experiments with private money failed because they were not considering economic incentives. So let me give you two examples. One example was called e-gold. So e-gold, you can find e-gold like electronic gold, just like email is the electronic mail. E-gold was a service created by an Austrian economist and oncologist. And he basically created this service that was a certificate for physical gold, completely covered, like collateralized one-to-one, transferable by everybody to everybody, just using the email. So that was a nice idea, but it was censored basically for political reasons. You can read online the judiciary history of e-gold, but it's very, very, from a judiciary point of view, is very bad because they basically were. It's clear that what they created was a system that was very famous in the early 2001, 2002, 2003, millions of users and millions of dollars of volume, and a billion of dollars of total gold reserves, and basically they were shut down with a very aggressive judiciary history. So those guys following eGold, they had to basically learn about cypherpunks and cypherpunk tools in order to create something that cannot be stopped. eGold was stoppable because it was centralized, like Napster for file sharing. Napster used a single server created by a single company, Napster. So in order to stop it, it was just necessary to stop the server, to shut down the server, and to find and close the company, and the system was down. While Bitcoin aims to be something like BitTorrent, which is a system based not on a company, but on an open source peer-to-peer protocol that everybody can create or use or read or copy or modify. So there's no central server, there's no company, there's just code that everybody can run, and the only way to stop the overall BitTorrent network is to stop everybody from running that code, everybody everywhere. As long as a few nodes are up, the network is up and it's usable. So the idea of Bitcoin was to get there from eGold, but there also was the other way around, because there are other experiments, especially following the DigiCash experiments in the early 90s, created by David Chaum, a cryptographer. So these experiments, there were many others, but they suffered a lot from the lack of scarcity, because the economics of these monetary tools, they were very bad. I give you some examples that are not coming directly from the cypherpunk field, but from video games. You may remember that in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of video games started to introduce video game currency. One very good example of that is Diablo 2. I don't know if any of you is familiar with the game, but the creator of the game, they put gold in it in order to be a currency. But they realized that gold was too easy to create because there were some tricks to create gold. So basically people stopped using gold as a money in the game because it was too much inflationary, and they started to use something else, namely the Stone of Jordan, which was something created for some other purposes, but it was very difficult to find it in the game. So it was more scarce, so it was more valuable, and so people started to use that as money instead of gold. This is just an example, but I could make many examples, and again in this book you can find some of those. And this example show you that not only the problem was political censorship of centralized systems, but also bad economic incentives. If there is one actor that can create inflation, this actor will be incentivized to create inflation. If somebody has the power to print money, that somebody will print money eventually. There is no way to resist to this kind of temptation. So that's the general idea. These two basically cultural movements, they merged around the beginning of 2008 into one single goal, creating something which is like e-gold, so something that is transmitting some value which is scarce, impossible to reproduce, with a very narrow supply that cannot be inflated by anybody, but that you can send around the internet without anybody knowing each other and without a single point of failure, without anybody being able to shut down the entire system. So solving the political censorship, because you don't know who the nodes are, there is perfect privacy, or there is good privacy at least, and they cannot distort the incentives because they can't, because the rules are shared by everybody. So no single actor can corrupt the incentives by printing money, basically. So this created basically Bitcoin. But so this is the, let's say, cultural part. Before we move to the proof of work point, and we start to discuss more technical aspects and less sociological aspect, tell me if let me know if there is anything not clear, because I can eventually maybe stop a little bit or But if everything is clear, I can just go on. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, it is about the privacy. So you were saying, or you are saying that with Bitcoin, sending money is absolutely privacy. However, sometimes in news I see that some people can trace some BTC movements, and they find
Yes.
some source of crimes about that. So why is that? Is because they are doing wrong things, or not because of the technology, or because of the technology?
That's a very correct question. You will see by the end of the presentation that the perfect privacy was the goal of the cypherpunk movement and of the e-cash of the cypherpunk movement. But this goal is not entirely realized in Bitcoin, at least not at the base layer, because the new technological innovation that will introduce, the blockchain, even if it doesn't identify you, it creates very strong public traces that everybody has to share with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we will learn that somebody is selling this as a feature of blockchain, traceability, but actually, compared to the original vision of the cypherpunks, it was not a feature, this was a bug.
Mm-hmm.
There has been
Mm-hmm.
other currencies experiments like Monero or Zcash that try to compensate with this, but we'll also discuss at the end of the 5 Ws about the Lightning Network, which is a way to avoid using the blockchain, which is not perfectly private yet, but it may become in the future. So what I want to make very clear is that the goal of Bitcoin was very strong privacy, but this goal is not perfectly achieved. And now, if you don't use Bitcoin in a certain way, it becomes even trivial to de-anonymize you and to follow you. If you use Bitcoin in a certain way, it's still very possible to remain perfectly anonymous, but it requires a lot of particular dynamics, which most of the actors, especially in the early days, they didn't know. So there was this game of basically cat and mouse between people learning how to de-anonymize Bitcoin users and Bitcoin users learning how to get better. But the purpose
Mm-hmm.
was very strong privacy, which we will discuss why it's not perfectly achieved.
Okay.
And I see that
Thank you.
somebody mentioned it. My pleasure. Somebody, yeah, you can see the transaction, but you don't know the owner. The original, you will see that right now that the original designs were designs in which you could not even see the transaction. But then we have to compromise because we will introduce the concept of blockchain that will require everybody to know everything about the transaction, but not the user. And I also see Agustin mentioning World of Warcraft, another very good example of the World of Warcraft gold, and many such cases in which to create a currency, you have to go back to the concept of scarcity, and you have to prevent people from printing more, otherwise the currency will collapse. Just like in real world, the same goes with, there are other examples like Linden Labs with Second Life. There are many examples of this. So gold is more secure. Yes, yes, gold was the objective. Like, can we create something as secure as gold? So let's move to this slide. So we want to decentralize. So we have e-gold. E-gold is a credit denominated in gold grams based on email in a centralized server. We don't want that because we want decentralization. So we want to create something like BitTorrent where everybody is the server. But there is a problem now. Let's imagine that you just want to share some musical file like MP3. Then BitTorrent is great because everybody can have a copy. And that's not a problem. Everybody can upload as many songs as they want, and other people will just download the songs. It works. With money, that's not the case, because if there is not an e-gold company that checks the gold reserves and the amount, and everybody can just pretend to be, if everybody anonymously can connect to the network and say, I have 3 tons of gold, then of course you don't have scarcity. Everybody will make up infinite amounts of gold and nobody will be able to check. So with the central company, with e-gold, there was somebody creating the scarcity artificially, the central party that was taking care of the fact that this gold credit was correspondent 1-to-1 to 1 gram of gold reserve. But if we decentralized, everybody will be able to make up any amount of gold they want. So there is a problem here. How can we create scarcity in a decentralized network? How can we create something that cannot be copied? seems like a paradox, because the definition, as I said, by definition, everything in computers, in information technology, in digital technology, is perfectly copyable. So what about that? So in order to respond, we have to move back to another problem, the problem of spam. So you know that the problem of spam is not new, is not something that we already have recently with with the digital revolution. There is also like physical spam. You have your mailbox, your physical mailbox, you open it, and there is stuff you don't want, like advertising or like political stuff. It's something that you don't want, but you receive it anyway. Why? Because the cost to produce this paper and to send it is not zero, but it's enough compared to the reach you can have. Basically, the cost doesn't grow linearly, it grows less than linearly. So if you send 3 advertising papers, you spend 3. If you send 300, you don't spend 300, you spend 299, because some economics of scale. If you send 3,000, you don't spend 3,000, you spend maybe 2,000. If you spend 3 million, if you send 3 million, you don't spend 3 million, you spend maybe less than 1 million. So the more you do, the more you have economies of scale. This was already present, but with physical email, these costs don't grow. So they still grow. Like if you had to send 2 billions snail mails, you will pay more than 1 billion, because there's more paper, more ink, more people distributing it. With email, everything changes, because with email, imagine it, to send one email, you have a cost, because you have to pay some electricity, you have to pay a computer, you have to have you be connected with the mailing service. Maybe it's free, but you pay in advertising, so you pay something, you pay some time. But when you send one email, you pay X, which is like a few fractions of a dollar. When you send 2 emails, you spend the same. When you spend 3 emails, 3,000, 3 millions, 3 billions emails, you basically spend the same. So with digital, since the digital revolution made copies easier, it created a terrible easiness creating copies. So it created the problem of spam. As you can imagine, so this seems like something very far from Bitcoin, but it's not so far, because you can still see that there is a problem of scarcity here. There is some connection with the discussion about scarcity, if you can find it. The problem of spam is that to create 2 billion emails is as much expensive as to create 3 emails. So you have a problem of scarcity. So how did people solve this problem? They use lists. Initially, so during the history of email was a decentralized protocol. It was like this, decentralized. Everybody could run up a SMTP service. Everybody, no restriction. Anonymous, you can send email to everybody, and people will route email around. But in the early 90s, spam started to become a huge problem, because even if some people were just trying to help the network by routing, these services were abused by spammers. So if you can, with just the cost of one email, send 3,000, 3 billions unwanted emails, somebody will do that. And so these malicious actors were starting to put a huge pressure on the routing nodes and also on the receivers. And you know that this is a problem which is still ongoing. If you open your email box right now, there still is spam. It's not as bad as in the 90s, though. In the early 90s, most of the traffic that the email servers were routing was spam. So it was bad. So they created a trusted list selection. So at the beginning, the lists were blacklists. Blacklist means that if you abuse the system, I will exclude your IP address, for example, from the system, or the physical address or your SMTP server. But blacklists in anonymous technologies like the early internet are very easy to bypass, because if we are anonymous, if we just use codes, it's very easy. If you abuse the system, I will ban your name, and you will just create another name, and then another, and then another. Just like something similar happens now on Twitter or X. You have a spam bot spamming your comments. You can block it, but other will come, because for the user, the cost of creating new usernames is low. So they keep doing it. So people move from blacklist to whitelist. Now, whitelist means that I will only route email coming from a known source, and I will only open email coming from known sources. I will delete everything else. These lists work. They do work because spam now is better, even it's not solved, but it's mitigated. But they have a very huge problem, centralization. So I said before that SMTP, the email protocol, is decentralized. That's true in theory. But if you try right now to set up your own email server, you will be able to send email and to receive email. But you will see that if you don't make a routing deal with Google or Yahoo or another centralized provider, your email will never reach anybody else, because all the routers, they just started to whitelist. Only email that are coming from Google are actually whitelisted. So you have to make a deal with the central party. The central party created basically a censorship problem, because now you have Google, everybody now is basically moved into centralized services to use email. So email used to use a decentralized protocol, but now it's centralized. So in 1996, one cypherpunk, one of the member of this movement, Dr. Adam Beck, a British doctor of cryptography, he came up with a solution. The solution is called hash cache. It is based on the concept of checksum or error correcting code. So you know that, like, if you have like a social security number, usually you have the content of the code, and then you have the last digit. The last digit will change based on all the combination of the other characters, so that if you make some mistake in translating or in transliterating, you will see the mistake in the checksum. So let me show you with an online tool. You can see the tool, right? You can see SHA-256 online. SHA means secure hashing algorithm based on 256 bit. This is a bit technical, but it's not very important. It just suffices you to say that this is some kind of control code. So I write I write something like hello as the control code 2CF24DBA. You see, this is 256 bits. That's why it's called SHA-256. These are, if you write this in binary, you will have 256 ones or zeros. This is in hexadecimal, so it's shorter, but that's the principle. And it's important because if you say hello with the exclamation point, the code changes completely. Now it's CE06. It's completely different. If we put two exclamation marks, it changes again, completely different. Now, if you delete one, you go back to the CE06. If you delete two, you go back to 2CF, the initial code. So every time you change something, the code changes, and every time you go back, the code gets back. So this code is deterministic. It means that it's not random. Every time you have the same input, it will give you the same output. But it is unpredictable in the sense that if you change the input, even just slightly with a single comma, the output will change completely in a way that you cannot predict. So this is a very good control code. It's very secure. There are some properties to these, like they're called pre-image resistance or second pre-image resistance, but they are technical things you don't need to know. The main point is, this is a deterministic rule that is based on mathematics. Everybody can replicate this open source on their computer. This is not a company doing this. Everybody can do that with open software. So it's just a mathematical tool. And you know that from the input, you will have a deterministic output. But from the output, you cannot find the input. So you cannot go back, basically. So this is interesting because basically, Adam Beck had an idea. So let's assume that I want to write an email to Adam Beck. All right. Hello, Adam. Well, before I do something like date, that today is February 29, 2024. And the time, like for you right now, is 6:47 p.m. to Adam Beck. Hello, Adam. Oops. Yeah. So the cost for me to write this email is very low, But now let's assume that Adam creates this challenge for me, and he will say, look, everybody that wants to write me an email or that wants to route an email through me, they have to select to add to the end of the email such a random number that the hash of the entire email will begin with 0. So let's try. Let's put 1 here. The hash is starting with F, not with 0. So let's try again with 2. This starting with B, not with 0. 3, starting with 1. 4, starting with 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now I'm bored, so I start to do, instead of changing the number, I will do 111. And I go, and you will see, oh, yes. So this is a solution. So if I just write this, hello Adam, how are you? The hash doesn't begin with 0. But if I write this with this final number, I do have the right code because it's 0 now. So now Adam will route my message, or anybody else using the system will route my message, and Adam will open my message. This is interesting because you may say, okay, this is useless because it's still a cost, but it's not a cost that you can enforce over big numbers. It's still a little cost. How much did it cost to me? A few seconds of trying some numbers. And if I use my computer instead of my hand, the computer will find the right solution in 1 millisecond. So it will be super fast. My CPU can find the solution in fraction of a second. So this is not a great cost. It's not stopping me from spam, except it is, because let's assume that I don't want to send this message only to Adam, but also to Adam and to Hal. So I say, hello, Adam and Hal. Now you see that the code is broken. It doesn't work anymore because I changed something in the message. So I have to go back. Oh, yes. I have to find another code that will make the hash start with 0. So let's try to do something back. Maybe I still want to send something to Adam alone. So I go back to this code. So it starts with 0. And now I change the date, because instead of sending it to 7:47, I will send it 7:50 p.m. Now the code is broken. Oh no, I have to do some work again and again. I have to redo the work. Oh, now I find it. So now there's just one trick. If the difficulty is too low, the spam will still be very high, because people will be still able to find a lot of solutions, but not infinite solution like in normal email. So it's still better. But maybe if too many people are spamming us, we can require to have 2 zeros at the beginning of the hash. 2 zeros is not the double the difficulty, is quadratically more. So like it's to the power of 2. It's way more difficult. Instead, if I try to find a solution with 2 0, look. Oh well, this is 1 0, not good enough. This was 1 0, not good enough. 1 0, not good enough. I cannot predict it. It's right. Oh, that it is. I found it, but it took a while. And if I want to file 3 0, I can guarantee you that we can go on for all the lecture tonight, and we will not find 3 zeros. Well, maybe we do, but we should have to be very, very lucky. Most likely we won't. So you can increase the difficulty or reduce the difficulty. This idea solves spam, because now the cost for everybody writing without spamming is low. Because if I just have to write to Adam, I can just my computer will find the solution in 1 millisecond. But if I want to send the same email to 2,000 billions of people, so to trillions of people, then I have to redo the work 3 billions of time. And if I want to send it to the same people, the same person, but 3 billion times every day, I have to rediscover a new code 3 billion times. So the fact that so it seems like I'm doing nothing, but you should know that every computer calculation will consume energy. This kind of computer calculation will consume very little energy, but some energy. So this special trick is good because it can show you that you will basically have to spend more. If you want to send more messages, you have to spend more energy. And the more messages, the more energy. So the costs are not are increasing linearly, not sublinearly. So now you cannot spam people. This is very good. What does it have to do with Bitcoin? Something, because there was another cypherpunk. His name was Halfini, and he was saying it would be great if proof of work was reusable. So let me get back to this slide. Okay, so we have two problems basically. The first problem is missing incentive. So let's say that I open up a website, and in this website I sell you, I don't know, I sell you cell phones. If I use a proof of work algorithm, I can prevent you from spamming me, but you are not paying me. The proof of work is a cost for you, which prevents spam, but is not a gain for me. As a producer of a service, I cannot sell you a telephone. So maybe if I'm selling something that doesn't cost much to me, like I'm selling prediction for the lottery numbers, it doesn't cost anything to me. I just make a prediction. So I don't want spam. So I will do a proof of work. So in order to request my website some kind of prediction of the lottery, you will do a proof of work so that we can use this mechanism to prevent spam. But that only works because prediction of lottery numbers is cheap. Otherwise, I will not do it. So Alfini was saying, how can we do something that is expensive for the requester, the client, but is also profitable for the server? And there was a second point, and basically he said, so right now the internet, so you know that the problem that I'm just mentioning with email is the same with the World Wide Web. Right now, if you navigate on a website, you will not send your IP packages to the website. You will send it basically through one company, which is called Cloudflare, which is an anti-spam company, and they will filter everything with a list, just like email. And if you happen to go on a website with a VPN or with Tor, they will make you do the CAPTCHA. The CAPTCHA, you know, the CAPTCHA number, the CAPTCHA code. The CAPTCHA is a proof of work. The difference is that it's just not an open source proof of work that everybody can check. It's something that only Google or other providers can check. But the CAPTCHA is a centralized proof of work. This is a decentralized proof of work. But Alfini was saying, if every website will ask people to do a small energy destruction proof in order to accept to get any kind of internet content, we will have billions and billions of joule of megawatt wasted of energy, because everybody will be basically, in order to navigate the internet, you will have to waste energy, which is wasteful. So the idea is that Alfini came out with another idea, which is the idea of transfer, the idea of reusable proof of work. Now, the reusable proof of work is very smart. I will talk about that in a minute, but first I want to introduce a few concepts. So I don't want to go too much into details about this, but the first I have to explain the concept of encryption. Encryption, it means something that can turn a message into a unreadable blob, and then the blob back to the original message. Encryption can be very easy. For example, you can imagine the Caesar cipher, which is very easy. Like you take your message, like "Hello Caesar, meet me at the Senate tomorrow for some meeting," by Brutus, and now you basically, your key is 7, so you move every letter of the message down 7 steps in the alphabet. So the resulting thing is a readable blob, and Caesar knows the code 7, so it will do -7, and it will go back to the original message. This is a very stupid encryption scheme, easy to break with trivial analysis, but there are more elaborate schemes. Like you may know about the Enigma machine in the World War II, or the Crypto.com, the Crypto IG company in Switzerland producing encryption machine for governments for many years, and they were backdoored. So that there are a lot of examples in history. But the interesting thing is that from encryption, and specifically asymmetric public key encryption, what does it mean? So the problem with symmetric encryption is that you have to give somebody the key. So Brutus have to select a key, let's say 7, give the key to Caesar, and now Caesar will be able to read the message with -7. But this is a very weak scheme because Brutus and Caesar, they have to meet to exchange the keys. So at this point, they could just exchange the message. So it's not a great help. So in the late 70s, people started to think about asymmetric encryption, which means that you take your key, you split it in two. One part is secret, it's called a private key. You keep it for yourself. Nobody else should know it. The second is a public key. It's like just a half of the key, and you tell it to everybody. Now imagine, mathematically it's complicated, but let's imagine that one half of the key can only turn one way, like clockwise, and the other half can only turn the other way, anti-clockwise. Now, this is interesting because Brutus, he wants to send the message to Caesar. He doesn't have to exchange a key with Caesar. He will just take the public key of Caesar that will go this way, that will lock the message in a clockwise way, and then he knows that Caesar has the other secret key correspondent that will unlock. So Brutus can encrypt the message with the public key of Caesar without knowing the secret key to unlock it. So Brutus can lock it, but not unlock it. And Caesar can unlock it, but not lock it. And if Caesar wants to respond, he will respond, okay, let's meet in the Senate. So Caesar will lock the message with the public key of Brutus, and Brutus will unlock it with his private key. This seems like something very close to Bitcoin, but this is not exactly how Bitcoin works. In Bitcoin, there is no encryption. You may hear people, well, there was no encryption, at least not at the beginning. You may hear people describing Bitcoin like an encryption system, like encrypted money. It's not. In Bitcoin, we don't encrypt and we don't decrypt. In Bitcoin, we sign and we verify the signature. What does that mean? That cryptographer working on public key encryption, asymmetric, they came up with an idea. What if Brutus has a message? He doesn't care about hiding it. He just does care that Caesar can control and check that the origin of the key of the message was Brutus. So Brutus, instead of locking the message with the public key of Caesar in order to hide it, he will lock the message with his own secret key. Now, he send the close locked message to Caesar, and Caesar can try to open it with the public key of Brutus. If it works, that means that it was closed with the private key of Brutus. So it's the other way around. So you can use this scheme to hide information by locking it with the public key, and the receiving party can unlock it with a private key. Sorry? Sorry? There is a question?
No,
Okay.
it's okay.
Okay. So in Bitcoin, you don't encrypt, you just sign. So I hope of course, this is a complex mathematical scheme. It's based on elliptic curve on finite field. It doesn't matter that you understand the mathematics unless you are a cryptographer, but it does matter that you understand just the functioning. Now you have a private key, a secret that you have to keep for yourself, that you will use to sign, and everybody can use the correspondent public key, which is basically your address, to check the signature. So Alfine came with an idea. So let's do this. Let's go here. So for example, I'm writing Adam back. Hello, Adam. Give me a weather forecast. So now I will write down, I don't really write it, but Adam, public key. I don't write it because I don't want to use a public key system here, but you imagine that this is the public key of Adam. The public key is just a number, just a big number, very big number. Now, I do the proof of work. Okay, found it. This is the solution. Now, Adam now has to buy a trading stock price prediction from Bob. Adam will not do another proof of work. So Adam, the day after, Adam, so the March 1, at the same time, Adam will have to ask to Hal Finney, hello Hal, give me a price prediction. Hal, public key. So one way to solve this without spam would be to recreate the solution. So Adam had to create work, a proof of work to write to Hal. And I had to create a proof of work to write to Adam from me. And Adam will have to create another proof of work to write to Hal. Like this, like, let's go, let's find it, let's find the solution. Oh, here it is, with 00, very lucky. But this is wasteful. And this is also not, so this means that everybody's spending some energy, but nobody's gaining anything. So there is an incentive problem. What if we do something like this? So I do the initial proof of work, but not to Adam. I do the proof of work to myself. And I put here my public key. And I just say reusable proof of work. I don't ask for anything. Now, I delete this. Okay, this is a solution. I already found the solution. Now, when I have to buy something from Adam, I will write from Adam. I will transfer the reusable proof of work to him, and instead of the solution, I will write down Giacomo's, which is me, signature from his private key. So you see, this is just like signing a check. Like I give you a check and then you give it to somebody else that gives it from somebody else. So now Adam, he wants to buy a service from Hal, and he will do to Hal Finney. Hal publish key, and Adam. So when Hal receive it, he doesn't check all this message because this message is not solved. There is not a good solution. So he will just check that the message directed to Hal Finney with the Hal Finney's public key have the Adam signature corresponded to Adam public key. Now it will check that the message from me to Adam has the right signature corresponding to my public key. And now when it's ready to check everything, it will only check the proof of work originally. So you see that this idea of reusable proof of work accomplished two things. One thing is eliminating the waste, because right now you don't have everybody making the proof of work. The first person, which is me, will make a proof of work to himself, to myself. Then I keep it there. And then when I need it, I will transfer it with the public key, with the private key signature to somebody else's public key. And then they will sign it to somebody else's public key with their private key, and so on, and so on, and so on. So in our example, let me see some names here in the chat. So I create a proof of work to myself, to my public key. Then I have to transfer it to Ivan. So I will put Ivan public key, and I will sign with my private key. Then Ivan will send it to Augustine. It will put in Augustine public key, signing with his private key. And then it will be the same with Robert and Deborah, and so on, and so on, and so on. This is great because, again, first thing is that we eliminate waste. But especially the second point is that we create now we solve the problem of missing incentives. So now I want to sell you a cell phone. I can use this because if you want my cell phone, let's do something cheaper, like a pencil. So this pencil, I want to sell it for $3. I give it to you if you show me a proof of work that had you spend $3 in electricity. So show me that you sacrificed $3 of electricity, and I will give you this. Now, you give me the proof, but I've been paid because now I am the owner of a $3 worth of proof of work. So if I want to buy a Kleenex box, which is $3, the person will say, okay, transfer me the proof of work that has been transferred to you, transfer it to me, and I will give you the box. And then the box seller can keep this proof of work and transfer it to somebody else, and so on and so on. So you see that this encryption scheme is good because it avoids waste, and it can create an incentive. Now, basically, we are finding with proof of work, we create a scarcity. And with this proof of knowledge, I call it proof of knowledge because you prove that you know the private key without showing it. So it's called proof of knowledge in cryptography. So with the proof of work, we create scarcity. And with the proof of knowledge, with perfect privacy, we can just transfer the scarcity. But there are two problems. One problem is, for example, I create the proof of work to myself, and now I send it I create the proof of work to my public key, and now I use my private key to transfer it to Ivan. But I also create another message signed by my private key again, because I still have it, sending the same proof of work back to myself. Now, Ivan will try. So Ivan will try to transfer it to Deborah, and I will transfer it again to Thomas. Deborah will only see the transfer from me to Ivan and from Ivan to Deborah. And Thomas will only see the transfer from me to myself and from myself to Thomas. Now, when Deborah and Thomas try to buy from each other, they will discover that they have been scammed because I multiplied the proof of work. So you can see that the proof of work is scarce, absolutely scarce. The proof of transfer is not. There is a problem of double spending. You can spend twice, 3 times, 4 times, infinite times. So we are back to the lack of scarcity. So for example, Al Finney, to do reusable proof of work in 1998, he was basically assuming a centralized service preventing double spending. So we're saying we will have a server, this server will, so you sign, and this server will countersign so that it will be honest and will not allow people to double spend. So it was a centralized solution. Now, way better as a centralized solution than eGold, because eGold is a big company with gold vaults. It's easy to stop, easy to censor, easy to find. Al Finney's server could just be a computer, a Raspberry Pi connected to Tor, so nobody could stop him, but still it was centralized. So if Al Finney wanted to inflate the money, he could, because he could just double spend to himself. So if Al Finney wanted to become rich, he could compromise the server, double spend to himself, and then inflate away the currency. So it was not a great solution. So in 1998, people was not very happy with the reusable proof of work. The implementation came later, actually in 2003, but it doesn't matter. 1998, it was the idea of proof of work. So now we have this problem, and we have another problem. One is double spending, and the other one is fungibility. What do I mean? What I mean is that computer power, computer efficiency increases over time. So every time I do some calculation, the calculation is cheaper. The better the computer becomes. So if I create to myself a proof of work which proves that I spent $3 in electricity to myself, now 1 year later I want to spend this proof to buy a pencil of $3. There is a problem though. $3 today they require much more proof of work than $3 1 year ago, because every year the computers become better and better and more efficient. So a proof of work from 2010 is not the same as a proof of work from 2011, 2012. So if I accumulate a lot of proof of work and I have to buy something, we enter a very messy, unfungible, non-fungible market in which I have to sell you. I will give you a fraction of the proof of work of 2010 and some of the proof of work of 2011. It's a mess. So after Alfine, here comes Satoshi Nakamoto. This is the first time in this speech where you talk about the blockchain. Until now, there is no concept of blockchain. The concept of our digital signature, which is a proof of transfer or proof of knowledge, and proof of work, which was already existing in 1996. So there's no blockchain here. There's no block, there's no chain, no block, no chain. Here, in 2008, somebody comes up with the idea of solving double spending without a central server. So let's try to go step by step to understand this point, which is the main point of the blockchain, the so-called blockchain technology. So now we know that we have a problem with double spending. So let's do something. Every time if I give I create some proof of work to my public key, I have to transfer my proof of work to Deborah. Before Deborah accepts it and gives me the pencil, before we take this transaction, this signature, this message, and we ask everybody in the system to put another signature as a vote, like as a proof that they have seen it. So let's assume that we are in this chat, in these lectures, we are how many like participants? Like 20 to 200, how much? 219, is right? Oh, a lot of people. So let's say we are 200. We can do that every time we create a message, all the two it will be sent to everybody. And now Deborah, before sending me the pen, she will wait, and she will say, I wait until 101 signed, so I know that they have seen it. So the Giacomo cannot trick me by creating another signature, another transfer to himself that he will send to the others, because they already seen it. So instead of the single server by Alfine that could trick, let's ask everybody to check. Everybody will have to check. How can you make them check? How can you incentivize them to actually check and be honest? That's a problem. That's tricky. But let's assume that. But we have another problem, which is way worse, which is basically the problem that if the system is closed, so if the 200 people are fixed people that we trust, then the system is very easy to censor because it's centralized. You go to these 200 people and you put them in jail, and the system is over. Or you confiscate their computer, the system is over. Instead, if you have an open system where everybody can join anonymously, that's better for censorship resistant, that's way better. But there is a problem. Now everybody can join and vote in different ways. So for example, I want to scam Deborah. So I send her a transaction. Deborah waits for 200 people to see it, and she waits for 101 people to vote for this transaction, signing it. So she said, I'm fine. I have the 51% of the total votes. So I'm fine. Let's say that she's even more lucky and she gets 200 people all online at the same time signing it. So she has 200 votes over 200. Now, I will wait a second. I will go to Amazon AWS. I will create 400 nodes with anonymous signatures and public keys. I can, because they're just mathematical tools. There's no cost in creating more users because it's an open system. And I will vote to a second transaction, which is different, which sends the same proof of work back to myself, to another public key of mine. So now Deborah has a transaction which is voted by 200 people. That's good. I have one voted by 400. Well, actually, yes, 400. Nobody knows that these 400 are just ghosts that I created because we are anonymous on the internet. So nobody can check. So you can see that if we are in a closed system, and I stress this because this is very relevant, because, for example, if we are in a bank or a consortium of banks, like Swift, we don't need any blockchain. we can just vote. We can just have a system where we have a quorum, like with Byzantine fault tolerant, PBFT, Praxis, with many consensus models. But we don't care for blockchains. We just have to vote. But in an open system, which is made by anonymous people, that's a problem, because everybody can fake votes, can create notes out of thin air. So the idea of Satoshi, which is brilliant, is to create, well, I mentioned here staking, so proof of stake. Some of you may have heard about proof of stake as a new idea launched by Peercoin or NXT or Ethereum or Paxos or whatever. But that's not true. The proof of stake idea was first proposed in 1998 by another cypherpunk, Wei Dai, in a protocol called B-Money. And again, if you sorry for sponsoring this book so much, but it's very good. So in this book, you can also see B-Money project by Wei Dai. Wei Dai is the name with W, Wei Dai. And Wei Dai in 98, he proposed a system to vote trying to prevent fraud. So he said, what if every time you have to vote, instead of just voting, you have to stake some of your proof of work on that vote? So you send the proof of stake to yourself. Now, if you vote for something, you have to put your money where your mouth is. So if somebody catches you lying, they can just basically destroy your stake and punish you. So you will stay honest. And as if you create 400 new nodes, you will have to put 400 new proof of works on them. So it will be very expensive for you. So if you do staking, creating a proof of work becomes expensive. But this solution was broken, and it still is broken, and was never fixed. And every claim otherwise is basically, technically speaking, a lie. So this idea has a problem of circularity, because in one version of history, I can put the stake on my vote, but then I can double spend my vote, and I can create another version of history in which I send my vote and my stake to another vote. And these two histories, I can create as many as I want. There's no cost in creating more history. So now you have to try to catch me, and you have to convince other to slash my stake. But this consensus to slash my stake will have to be based on some kind of chronological order. But there's no chronological order because there is no consensus yet. So you see, it's a circularity. So this kind of idea, proof of stake, 1998, is using the ownership of transferable proof of work to vote on the ownership of transferable proof of work. So it's circular. You can always do so-called long-range attacks. So you can also rewrite history. Let's try to frame it in another way. Well, let's first see how Satoshi Nakamoto solved it. Satoshi Nakamoto, anonymous cryptographer, we don't know who is, maybe a group of cypherpunk, maybe some of the people I mentioned, some of them, it could be part of Satoshi, we don't know. So it comes with an idea, which is to create a time chain. Satoshi Nakamoto never uses the word blockchain, never. He used the word, the expression proof of work chain or time chain in the code. In the white paper is proof of work chain. In the code comments is time chain. So this time chain basically has this characteristic. Every proof of work includes the hash of the previous proof of work, and the previous includes the hash of the previous, and so on. Now, every proof of work not only not only creates new proof of work that you can transfer eventually, but they also use as a voting card, as a voting token to vote on other people transfer. So now I create some proof of work to my public key. Now I use my private key to send this proof of work to Deborah. Deborah waits before sending me the pen. Now she waits for the next proof of work made by Ivan, and the next proof of work will include the hash of my transaction to Deborah. Now, could I create other? So after many people, so after another person built on top of Ivan, and Alice on top of that, and Bob on top of that, and Claire on top of that, and we have 6 building blocks on top. So can I go on Amazon AWS and create 7 new users voting for me? I can, but now I have to give these 7 blocks more energy than all the other blocks together. So in order to rewrite the history, I have to spend more energy than all the other players of the system together. So you see what Satoshi is doing right now is basically reusing proof of work, not just to create scarcity, but those of the token, but also to create scarcity of the history where the token is transferred. So now to vote on one history will cost you money, will cost you work, unforgeable, undouble spendable proof of work, which is great because proof of work cannot be double spent, but proof of transfer can be. So proof of stake is circular because you use proof of transfer to prove that you're voting correctly on a proof of transfer, while proof of work is using proof of work to prove that you're voting correctly on a proof of transfer. So that works. I know it can be a little bit complicated. If you are lost, maybe just trying to check the question, but if you are lost, incredible complexity, Augustine is asking if it's related with intelligent contracts. The term is usually smart contracts. I will go into this. Thank you. Can I ask a question? Yes, Julian, if you want to ask a question with your voice, you can. Well, feel free to ask whenever you want, Julian. Now, for the answer to Augustine, yes, this is related with the concept of smart contract. There is another person, another cypherpunk. He's called Nick Szabo. He's still alive. He's still going around speaking. And Nick Szabo, you can find again information about him here. Nick Szabo is Nick Szabo has this idea. He says, just using private keys and public keys is boring. We can do better. One example. What if I want, so let's say that I do a proof of work that is worth $3. And now I want to send this proof of work to German, but also to Maria. So instead of doing 2 proof of works, I can do one, which is worth $3, and I will split it. I will create one message that will say 1/3 of this proof of work will go to the public key of German, and 2/3 will go to the public key of Maria. Or maybe I have to pay, for example, Gustavo, but Gustavo is selling me a pen that is worth $2, and my proof of work is $3. So I will write a complex message that will say, Gustavo, I send to your public key. I sign with my public key a proof of work which is worth $3. But now of these, 2/3 are going to your public key, and 1/3 are going to this other public key, which by the way is still me. I'm giving myself a change, basically. So I'm sending back some change. This is an example of smart contract. Right now, you hear about smart contracts in a more generic way, but the origin of the term coming from Nick Szabo was something like this. Instead of just doing private key sending to public key with a signature, let's do something more complex. One example is this, is splitting. So I give something to you and something to you, or something to you and something back to myself. So I can split the proof of work, which is just like we have money in the wallet. You're asking me for 8. I just have 10. I just have 20. So I give you 20 and you give me back 12. So this is the same, changes. This is one example, but you can do other things. For example, now I have to pay you 40. I don't have a proof of work that is worth 40, but I have 2 proof of works that are worth 20 each. So in the same transaction, I say, I spend this proof of work of 20 and also this other of 20, and I send them together to your public keys. This is also a smart contract because I'm creating a complex structure to the transaction. But I can do better. What if Laura and Juan, they create a company, and they are 50-50, and I have to pay the company. So now I can do a payment that is not going to the public key of Juan or the public key of Laura. Is going to the payment can be transferred only if both the private keys of both Juan and Laura will sign together, or if one of them signs. So you can create a conjoint bank account or disjoint signatures in bank account. You can create, like you can do an address that will do. So you can spend this proof of work only if the president of your company signs with his private key, or the secretary with one advisor, or 7 advisors after 3 years. So Nick Szabo consider that you can add a lot of complex rules to this transfer. The most obvious rule is from my private key to you, from my public key to your public key, using my private key to sign. But if we want to go more complex, we can. This is smart contract. In the current environment of crypto smart contract, the word took a very different kind of meaning. But originally, this was the idea: complex conditions. So, for example, I give inheritance. You are my son. Give me your public key. I will give you a transfer, but you cannot spend this transfer until 6 years has passed. This is smart contract. And we can do a lot of complex stuff with this smart contract. So that was a very good question. So Satoshi Nakamoto creates this chain, time chain. Every block includes the hash of the previous block. So for example, in this picture, you can see block 10 as a hash, and the hash of block 10 is the first field of block 11. And the hash of block 11 is the first field of block 12. It's not a very nice picture, but this is the picture of Satoshi Nakamoto, so I used it. And so this is...
Giacomo,
Yeah.
sorry for interruption. I
Yes,
have a question. Sorry
sure.
for my English, not is the best, but I will try to explain. In
Sure.
terms of cybersecurity, how much protected the blockchain right now are? It's like we can protect our cryptocurrencies in this model of blockchain.
So to answer to your question, you have to separate 2 threat models, 2 attacks. One is signing with your keys. So how much protected is your model from signing with your keys? Well, it depends. First, if your cryptography is strong. Right now, the cryptography used by Bitcoin and all the other Bitcoin clones is strong. So people cannot guess your private key from the public key. There is a theory that with quantum computers, we could build quantum computers using 20,000 logical qubits. Each logical qubit is made by more than 4,000 physical qubits, all in coherence. And with that, using short algorithm, we can break Bitcoin cryptography. But that's as of now, regardless of what you may read, as of now, I feel confident to tell you this is science fiction yet. This is like curvature space travel. It's possible in theory, maybe with some kind of negative energy, but it's not realistic right now. Or like nanobots doing mining with nanobots. It's something science fiction. So right now, your private key are secure because nobody else can crack them. They are not secure if somebody can read them. So if you write your private key on your email, Gmail, a Gmail employee, a Google employee can read them. They will understand the public key. They will check, oh, look, this public key can move some money, and they will spend your money, and they will be gone. And you will never get back your money. So if you leave your keys around, the security is weak. But if you protect your key, the security is strong. But when you will have the lecture with Riccardo Masutti, he will explain you that in key security, you have 2 problems. One is if you leave your keys around, somebody will use them to spend your money. But if you hide your keys too well, you will not be able to find them anymore yourself. So you will lose money again because there's nobody that can move your coins for you. Nobody can guess your private key. So if you lose it, you lose it. It's just like taking cash and throw it into a volcano. It's gone. So this is one side, private keys. The second side is double spending. How protected is this model against double spending? The answer is it depends on two things. One thing is how many blocks is my transaction buried under. So when I send my transaction to Franco waits before selling me something. He waits for one proof of work to include my transaction. Now he knows that in order for me to undo the history, to rewrite the history, I would have to spend at least one block of proof of work. Now, if we wait for two blocks on top, he knows that since the blocks are chained, in order to double spend and rewrite the history, I will have to go back and spend twice the amount of work, actually quadratic, because I have to spend twice the work while everybody else is continuing. So in order to do to build the longest chain, I have to spend way more work. So the answer is that how much your money is secure from double spend in this model depends on A, how much money you are transferring. If you are transferring $1 billion, which you can, if you're transferring that, then you have to wait that the cost to rewrite history is more than 1 billion. Otherwise the people that I mean, your payee will have to wait for many blocks. Let's say that if you are sending, just giving you very non-specific numbers. If you're spending $200, you may wait for one confirmation. If you spend $2,000, you probably want two confirmation. If you spend 2 million, you may want 6 confirmation. So it depends. The second factor is how many people with how much powerful computers are doing proof of work, because the more money is being the more energy is spent on proof of work, the more secure the transfer is against double spending. So in 2009, Bitcoin proof of work was spending a little energy, some energy, basically 10 people with a CPU. Now in 2024, they are spending more energy than a small country. So now in order to double spend your money, they have to take over more energy than the entire country. So now it's very expensive to redo the history. In Bitcoin, you'd never have perfect security about double spending, but you have exponential security. Every block, every time. So one proof of work in Bitcoin is 10 minutes. Now we'll explain why. And every 10 minutes, the security grows exponentially. So eventually you can say that after 6 confirmations, so 60 minutes on average. Why do I say 10 minutes? Because I didn't explain it yet. So maybe I just, maybe people will discover proof of work every second. So this is the last point of point 2, inflation control. So Satoshi put 2 rules on top of this chain. One rule was that there is an automatic difficulty adjustment. So the idea is that the blocks should come on average every 10 minutes. If I have blocks on average over a 2 weeks period, if the average is 1 block every 9 minutes, it means that the blocks are coming too fast. So the difficulty, the number of 0 in the hash, they will have to increase for the next proof of work. So the proof of work will slow down. If it's coming not every 9 minutes on average, but every 11 minutes, it means that it's too slow. So the difficulty, the number of 0 for a proof of work, it will decrease. So now the proof of work will become easier to do. So there will be more proof of work, more frequent. So in Bitcoin, the difficulty, the number of 0 you have to find with your proof of work, they are not set in stone by somebody. They are adaptive. They can adapt. So if the network is too fast, it means that there is too much proof of work, and then proof of work becomes too hard. It becomes harder, and that slows down the frequency. If the frequency is too low, then the difficulty will go down, so the frequency will increase. So it self-adjusts. That means that they will come into existence exactly one proof of work every 10 minutes on average, forever. This is very different from everything else. Like Satoshi Nakamoto called this property mining, like gold mining, because he was trying to recreate some form of digital gold. But it's interesting that this stuff is way more strict than gold. Okay, that's probably not a question, probably just some mic left on. So in gold, if gold goes up in price, gold miners will be more profitable, so they will try to extract more gold. It's not like if gold goes up 2x, you cannot extract 2x the gold, because then the gold mine is not infinite, so it's harder the deeper you go. But still, you can increase a little bit the production. So when gold goes up, the production of gold goes up a little bit, not much, because gold is not very elastic, but it's a little bit elastic. The production of proof of work in Bitcoin is completely inelastic. So if the price of Bitcoin goes up, like today or yesterday, miners will try to create more proof of work because the price is up, so it's more profitable. They can sell it for more, this proof of work. But when they do, they increase the frequency, and so that increases the difficulty. So now the frequency goes down. So 1 unit of proof of work is found on average every 10 minutes forever. This is the first time that the perfect scarcity is achieved in any transferable asset. Like again, with gold, that's not the case. If the price goes up, the supply will go up. With oil, yes?
Sorry, question. Can I find that piece of code on a public Git repository?
Absolutely, you can. Let's try to do it live. So the difficulty adjustment. Here it is. On GitHub, Bitcoin/Bitcoin/blob master, source code, proof of work, CPP. It's written in C++. You have here, this is an if. This is the parameter proof of work allow minimal difficulty blocks. Well, this is testnet, but this is testnet. Yeah, this is it, right? There's a target. Basically, the target is 1 block every 10 minutes. If you are below the target, now you increase the proof of work. If you are above the target, you decrease it.
Awesome.
So it's here.
Yes.
Now you can change it, but if you change it, everybody else, you will create a block that is not following the rules. So everybody else in the system, they will say, oh, let's look at this block. No, this is not following the protocol. So I will discard it. I will not build on top of it. So we will not be able to sell. So you create a proof of work and nobody will accept it for in exchange or anything, because it's broken, it's not following the rules. So everybody is incentivized to follow the rules, because if you change the rules yourself, nobody will accept your money. It's not money anymore. If everybody change it, then we can change it together. But it must be literally everybody all together, which is almost impossible. The rules of Bitcoin did change a little bit in some particular cases, but everybody had to agree, which is something that at the beginning of Bitcoin, when Bitcoin was very young, it was very frequent. But now it's kind of difficult to do. And it's getting more and more difficult. And eventually, it will be impossible to change the protocol. And even right now, if you propose to change the difficulty adjustment, nobody will accept, because you're basically touching inflation. Satoshi introduced 2 inflation control mechanisms. One is called difficulty adjustment, which is this. It's a control loop where the more you mine, the more difficult it becomes. It's similar to, in a way, gold, because the more people try to deplete a mine, the more difficult it becomes to take the mine. So if you discover a new gold repository, at the beginning you can just pick gold nuggets from the ground, but then you have to actually start filtering the dirt, and then you have to use dynamite to go deep. So it becomes harder. But also the idea is that eventually your gold mine will exhaust. It will basically dry up. So to introduce this model, Satoshi creates something called the halving. The halving. So what does it mean? It means that in the first proof of work was divisible in basically, let's say, it was divisible in 5 billions of minimal units. 5 billions of units. Now the minimal units, the minimal divisible, the atoms of Bitcoin. So let's imagine that you have gold. You can divide 1 gram of gold. You can go half a gram, 1/4, 1/8, smaller. Then you write to 1 atom of gold. You cannot divide it anymore because now you have protons and electrons. So you cannot. Gold is gold up to that level. Bitcoin is the same. You can take the proof of work and you can divide it. The first blocks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they were divisible by basically 5 billion times. And then the smallest 5 billion times was called 1 Satoshi. It's called now 1 Satoshi. Back then it was just called a coin or a unit. And now we call it Satoshi in honor of Satoshi Nakamoto. So the first proof of work were divisible by 5 billions. But the price of this unit was so low that it was very ugly, because in order to send you $1 in 2011, I had to send you several billions of units. So Satoshi changed the UX, the representation, and he defined 1 Bitcoin, 1 BTC is equal to 100 millions of fundamental units. So in Bitcoin, the fundamental unit, the Satoshi, is worth very, very little, a fraction of a dollar, and you can just move 1 Satoshi. But 100 millions Satoshi is called 1 Bitcoin. So some people are a little bit confused today, because sometimes they say, okay, Bitcoin is $65,000. So I don't have $65,000. But that's just like saying that 1 ton of gold is that money, but you don't have to buy a ton of gold. You can buy half, or 100, or just 1 gram, or half a gram. Same with Bitcoin. You can buy small pieces, but back then in 2009, small pieces were so small that Satoshi created a name for 100 millions of pieces, which is called 1 Bitcoin today. So 1 Bitcoin is 100 millions of Satoshis that are the smallest unit in Bitcoin. So what is this idea of halving? The idea is that the first blocks, they are divisible by basically 5 billion. But after 4 years, the divisibility decreases. So a block found in 2009 gives you 5 billion Satoshi, which is 50 Bitcoin. So 5 billion is 50 times 100 million. Yes. So it's 50 Bitcoin. Then in 2000, every 4 years, the number of Bitcoin in a proof of work will be cut in half. So from 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, it was 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes on average. So that means 5 billion Satoshis. In 2013, 14, 15, 17, it was 25 Bitcoin every block. So basically 2.5 billions. Now, Satoshis. In 2018, 9, 10, 11, 12, then there's the first halving, 13, 14, 15, second halving, 16, 17, 18. Well, anyway, in 2 months, there is the third halving. So the Bitcoin went from 50 Bitcoin every block to 25 to 12.5 to 6.25, and they keep halving and halving and halving and halving. There will be a moment in which this will stop, because basically at the end of everything, we are running very late. Tonight I'm very late, but anyway. So at the end of everything, you cannot divide the Satoshi more, because 1 Satoshi is the fundamental unit. So the last halving will happen around the year 2140, and then it will just stop. Now I have to run a little bit. I have to go a little bit faster because I spent too much time on this, but this was important. So what is block space? The question you may ask is, there are two basic questions. One, why should a proof of work creator include? So I say that I sent a proof of work to Deborah, a transfer to Deborah. Now Deborah is waiting for somebody else to create a new proof of work and include my transfer inside her proof of work. The question is why? Why should him or her? Why does he care? The answer is that every time you do a transfer, you can optionally leave some satoshis to the worker that will include your transaction first. So when I send my satoshis, my proof of work to Deborah, I will spend with my signature, let's say 1 million of satoshis, but I will not give this 1 million to the public key of Deborah. I will give just 999,999 to Deborah, and the last satoshi I will leave it there. Every miner that will include that transaction into the block, they will be able to claim not just the new production, the new 25 and 6.25, the new inflation, predictable inflation, but they will also be able to include this fee in order to be sure that they actually they get paid. This is interesting because not only now there is an incentive for people to include the transaction in the block, but there is also an explanation of what will happen when the inflation will go to zero in the year 2140. Then the miners will keep mining, but instead of receiving inflation, they will receive zero. The new proof of work will be worth zero. It will not be divisible anymore, but they will get all the fees of all the transactions included in the block. So this is why you can see this structure here, because every block can host many transactions, like transaction 0, 1, 2, 3. They get hashed in this tree of hashes, and the root of the tree gets put inside the block, and the miner that discovered this block 11, they will get all the fees from transaction 0, transaction 1, transaction 2. Of course, there is a problem that now let's do to the second slide. There is a problem of scalability, scaling. Why? Because let's imagine that every block can only include one transaction. So every 10 minutes, you can create a new proof of work and you can transfer another proof of work. So there's just one proof of transfer every proof of work, and there is one proof of work every 10 minutes. So there is one proof of transfer every 10 minutes. That means that all the Bitcoin users, they will have to compete to get into that single transaction inside a single block. So every 10 minutes, there's like an auction in all the world, and everybody will try to enter. So if I try to enter with 1 Satoshi, but you try to enter with 2, somebody with 3, 400, 500, 700, 6 million. So all the users will have to compete to enter, to have a confirmation, to have security. So the fees will become very, very, very high if you have small blocks. But on the other side, if you have small blocks, the time chain will be small, because every 10 minutes you just add the size of one single proof of transfer. So even if you do smart contracts, it's still small. So we can download it in cell phone, we can keep it in sync with over Tor, with a mesh network with the satellite. So it's great. It's great for receiving because you can download all the blockchain, but easily. But it's bad for sending, because in order to send, you have to compete with everybody else and spend a lot of money. Now, what if for every transaction, instead of for every proof of work, instead of one proof of transfer, you put 1 billion proof of transfer? So you make giant blocks. So that's a problem, because now on one side, there is a lot of space. Every 10 minutes, there's so much space that the price to be included in the auction will be very low. So I spend 1 Satoshi and I'm in, because there's so much space that there's space for everybody. But now the system will grow in data of basically let's say 3 gigabyte every 10 minutes, which compounds and becomes basically, it's impossible for a cell phone to stay in sync. Not just to store it, because to store it, you can just compress it or prune it, but you cannot even stay in sync, because downloading a block for some devices will take more time than 10 minutes. So so if you have a giant block, by the time you're finished downloading it, we are already at the next block. So the system centralizes completely. So we have a paradox, because if we have blocks too tiny, the system is hard to write because it's so expensive, but it's easy to read, so you can receive easily. If blocks are too large, the system is very easy to write because it's not expensive to include the transaction, but it's very expensive to read it, because to sync your node, you need a supercomputer with a perfect internet connection. So Satoshi chose something in between. He said that every 10 minutes, there is one block of 1 megabyte. And then in 2017, with the change of the rules, which everybody agreed upon, we changed the rules from 1 megabyte to a maximum of 4 megabyte. So now we have 4 megabyte top, but we cannot increase forever, because after a while, the size of the block will be so large that nodes will not be able to download it before the next block. And this will create a situation in which the big miners, they will mine on their self faster than everybody else can download it. So they will create complete centralization. So now, very fast for the last slides. How do you solve this? I'm not going to enter this about the Lightning Network. Some of the other speakers may give you some more details, but it is that instead of writing all the time on the time chain or the blockchain, we can only write once. For example, the A here is Alice, the B is Bob. So instead of Alice writing on the blockchain every time she wants to pay Bob, they write together one smart contract only once. So they write on the chain once, and then they can update this smart contract off chain. So they just exchange signatures between each other without going in the chain all the time. So the chain is only used for settlement of high value. So the chain is like Swift, slow, expensive, big amount settlement, and small fast payments, they move off the chain. So you may have read somewhere that Bitcoin is not the point, but the point is blockchain. So that you may have read some research about blockchain without Bitcoin. The interesting paradox is that the main field of research in Bitcoin is how to have Bitcoin without blockchain. The blockchain is used to avoid double spending, but it's also a problem for scalability, because the blockchain is a system in which every node has to download information from any other node forever. So if I pay a coffee today, I'm in Madeira. If I pay coffee in Madeira today, using the blockchain, every Bitcoin user in 100 years, they will have to download my payment to verify all the chain, which is crazy. It cannot scale. So the chain is being used mostly for the high value settlement, and everything else is moved on the Lightning Network, which I cannot explain very detailed. Let me just give you quick 3 slides, and then I'm over. It's probably very late. What time is it? Yes, almost. Let's do very, very, very fast these slides. So these slides is about crypto. The term indicated cryptography before Bitcoin. Now it indicates the cryptocurrency landscape, which is a giant kind of. So there are many cryptocurrencies. Like at this point, there are probably millions historical cryptocurrencies. So they're just copies of Bitcoin. There is a precedent for this. The precedent I want you to look into is the protocol wars. So when the internet protocol was discovered in the 70s, it was open source. Everybody could copy it. It was a government program in the US, DARPANET, but everybody could copy it. And so everybody did copy it. And there was a rush. There was basically a struggle, a run to create more and more and more. So this, you can see here in this image, this is a t-shirt of Cisco in 1991. And they were boosting, they were proud of supporting not just TCP/IP, which is what we are using right now to communicate between you and me. So TCP/IP is TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, on top of IP, Internet Protocol. Version 4 was finalized in 1984. So after that, Apple created a new network, incompatible proprietary, called Apple Talk 1, and then Apple Talk 2. Then the ISO-OSI Standard Consortium created the ISO CLNS. Then Xerox created XNS, and then they created PUP, and then they created, Intel created another protocol, and then IBM created another protocol, and then Microsoft created another protocol, and everybody was trying to replicate the internet. And it was interesting because for most of the 80s and a few years in the 90s, everybody was convinced. It was called the protocol wars. Everybody was convinced that the internet was old technology, and these new networks were the future. Actually, in 1995, around 1994, 1995, with Netscape, all these other protocols, after almost 15 years of protocol wars, all of them disappeared. Now they only exist as like historical curiosity. The only protocol that won was the original TCP/IP. There is an interesting point, because somebody may think that this is just by chance. This is just how it went, but it could have went in another way, like Betamax and VHS. But this is not the case, because the problem was that when you have to, so there are bad incentives. When you have to, so let's say Apple Talk was coming late to the game. So TCP/IP was already spreading as an open model that everybody could adopt between universities and security departments and some scholars. So TCP/IP was growing. Apple could grow, but not as fast as the actual open protocol. So in order to trick, they had to create, they had incentives to try to cut the corners and to do aggressive marketing, overselling. And then Xerox, they didn't have any incentive to converge over Apple use, because why should they help Apple? So Xerox created another one, and then another one. And so you can see the same in cryptocurrencies. There is no single cryptocurrency, except the first one, has a first mover advantage. So no single cryptocurrency can actually attract people to work on the open source standard. Every other cryptocurrency will try to outcompete Bitcoin. And how? Since they cannot grow faster than Bitcoin adoption, they have to do more marketing. And if you don't want to do marketing, you have to centralize. For example, let's say Ethereum, they didn't create a proof of work currency at the beginning. They created pre-mine. So they mined to themselves originally 80% of the total supply, and then they sold the total supplies in an ICO, initial coin offering, like an IPO basically. And they have a marketing team. They have a leader that talks with politicians, and they created an alliance with Microsoft. So they had to centralize with one structure that can decide everything. That is centralized, because they need to go faster, and to go faster you need marketing, and to have marketing you have to be centralized. The second point, which is very important for cryptocurrency, is that Bitcoin is scarce, because the halving process makes so that there will always only be 2.1 quadrillion satoshis, which is 21 million of bitcoins, because every bitcoin is 100 billions of satoshis. But there will be a finite amount of bitcoin, but an infinite amount of cryptocurrencies, because everybody can create the cryptocurrencies, and there will be infinite number of cryptocurrencies, and within each, many of them, they have infinite supply. And even the one like Ethereum has infinite supply, but even the ones that don't, like Litecoin, still they are so centralized that if the incentives get strong enough, the centralized entity that controls them, they will increase the supply, because there is no decentralization or nodes to prevent it. So the point here would be that many Bitcoin scholars think that we may or may not, but probably we may assist to a similar dynamic of the protocol wars, where we have some years of many clones building up, but then eventually the original open model winning, and all the proprietary or centralized clones basically disappeared. This is something that, I mean, the first so-called altcoin, which is named coin, was started in 2011, so 2 years after Bitcoin. The first famous one, Litecoin, started in 2012, and then there was like many others. So it's almost 11 years that this war, this token war, goes on, and still there is no sign of super centralization, except the fact that Bitcoin remains always the number one so far. But it's still an ongoing dynamic. Something similar, but then I will stop because it's very late. It happens with the word blockchain. So that the term is, I give you another metaphor, another comparison. So after the protocol war ended and the world converged on TCP/IP version 4, so the open initial standard, and all the clones died after more than 15 years of fights. They died all in 1 year. There was the idea that the internet is not very important. What is important is the technology behind the internet. So in this book, The Road Ahead, Bill Gates, in I think May 1995, he wrote a single page that said that internet was not important. Internet was an old technology, soon to disappear. What was really important was the concept of information superhighway, which will not just be the internet, but a lot of other different technologies. It's just the technology behind. What happened is that a few months later, Microsoft launched Internet Explorer with the tidal wave speech, and so Bill Gates changed all the new copies of the book. So if you buy the book pre November 1995, you find on the book the internet is old, the internet is over. The only important thing is information superhighway. But if you read the edition after 1995, he changed it, and now it reads, the internet is the information superhighway, which is similar to Bitcoin and Bitcoin stuff. So basically, for many years, since 2015 to a couple of years ago, the point was Bitcoin is old, is boring, or is dangerous, is polluting the environment, is over, but the blockchain technology is great. And now the situation is moving to Bitcoin is the blockchain technology. I think it's very similar as well. Last slides. This is a slide I made up for my consulting clients. It's not a scientific slide. It's just a symbolic slide. So the number here they are not like a market study. They're just a theoretical explanation. So the idea is that on the vertical, I basically put how much of hype some kind of application of blockchain is, and on the horizontal, I put how much are you actually using a blockchain. So the first category, I call it blockchain as an excuse, BAAE, blockchain as an excuse, which is the greatest hype. So let's imagine that the bank will have to create a system with public key encryption that doesn't have anything to do with the blockchain. Zero. Public key encryption is not connected with the blockchain. But since there is some hype, they will say they created a blockchain. Or you have a supply chain manager. They want to move from closed source to open source license. They will say they created a blockchain. The most obvious case was an iced tea company in the US. They were not selling much iced tea, so they converted the name from iced tea to blockchain, and their shares on the stock market basically exploded in 2017. Now it's not that bad. It's getting better, but still, like, there was a moment in 2017 where Disney created a blockchain, and everybody created a blockchain. Most of those were not blockchain. They were just centralized databases because there was no reason to have blocks. So they called themselves blockchains, but there were no chains and no blocks. The second would be blockchain as a standard. So even if you don't use Bitcoin, the blockchain can be reused. So let me give you an example. Many people tried over the year to introduce peer-to-peer encryption. Like WhatsApp has peer-to-peer encryption, but it's very hard. Why? Because the user will lose the private keys. So what you do right now is use telephone numbers as a proxy, but telephone number is very centralized. You can have SIM swap. You have a lot of problems. You cannot ask the users of WhatsApp to write down 12 words for a private key. They will not do it. They will lose it. They will mess it up. But in a world where everybody's using Bitcoin, the interesting consequence is that everybody will be able to store wealth into 12 words of backup, or they will be able to use hardware wallets and devices. So Bitcoin is an economic incentive for people to learn how to do key management, which is what you will learn to do with Riccardo Masutti in this course. If you do learn it, now I can create a new encryption system that leverages that. There are many other examples. Then I put the use case, blockchain is a notary. So you may not know it, but in Guatemala, the last elections, one startup cooperated with the government. They took all the election results, partials, and they put a hash of those inside the hash tree, and they put the root of the hash tree into a Bitcoin transaction. So since the Bitcoin history cannot be rewritten after a few blocks, they can give a proof that nobody altered the results of the election after a while. So they can do like a time stamping of everything, trustless. It was done by Intesa Sanpaolo Bank and Deloitte back in 2018, and now they did it for Guatemala. It does work. And then the last one is blockchain as a ledger. So just use it as a ledger to transfer Bitcoin, basically, or the altcoin. But for the reason I explained to you, it's mostly Bitcoin, the point. There is, like, you will discuss, for example, Tether. Tether is a case of, in a way, is a case of Bitcoin as a standard, because we have to move. Tether is just credit of a dollar, but we reuse blockchain technology because it's a good open source standard to transfer this credit across different platforms that cannot speak with each other. So there is some use of the blockchain beyond Bitcoin, but the degree of use is, the more you use it, the less hype you have, but the more serious the application is. Okay, super late, but I hope you're still awake, and we can probably take a very last round of questions, and then I will have to go.
Ok, para finalizar, si alguien tiene alguna pregunta puntual que quiera hacer para terminar de redondear los conceptos, lo pueden hacer y ya con esto iríamos finalizando.
Somebody's coming out to ask it, right? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yes, Mr. Giacomo. Hello.
Hi.
There is
Hello.
a question. Maybe I couldn't hear it very clear, but you said the date about halving the Bitcoin, the next halving process of Bitcoin was around April. Is there like a date or something like that?
So the date is unpredictable because halving Bitcoin come down. So the date is unpredictable because the proof of work is set to have to basically have one proof of work every 10 minutes on average. But on average, the average can change based on let me just see. Okay, this is it. Tab share. So now you can see this. This is a countdown. So right now, the ATA is calculated based on the current proof of work. Is calculated 24th of April on the 23, or basically at night of UTC. But this countdown will change because, for example, let's imagine that the price goes up. If the price goes up, profitability of mining goes up. So more miners will turn up more machines. So the hash rate will go up. So this countdown will go down. And randomness can also change. For example, sometimes you don't have a block exactly every 10 minutes. On average, you have them every 10 minutes. But sometimes is every 40. Sometimes it's every 1 minute. Sometimes it's every. Let me show you this. Share this table. So this is okay. This is a blockchain represented blockchain. So let's go to block 0. Let's say block 10. So block 10. So you can let's do this. Sorry, just a second. So okay. So this is the block 0. After the block 0, 5 days passed and nobody found the block because nobody was there except Satoshi Nakamoto. Then finally somebody found the block. Then the next block arrived after 1 minute. So you see faster. Then the next block 7 minutes. The next 13, 7, 6, 9, 6, 8, and so on. Sometimes it is let's see, recently, like now. No, sometimes recently. Well, let's see. So sometimes it's for example, now it's 15 minutes. Before it was just 2. Before it was 15. So you see that the block time is not exactly 10 minutes. It goes in different kind of, on average it's 10 minutes.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mr. Giacomo.
My pleasure. Maybe we will meet again at the end of the seminar, but in the meantime, I'll leave you in good hands with the other speakers, and let me know if there is any more question. I can probably answer via Telegram message with the organizers and remain in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bien.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Para